Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Christophers Allen Beck from Bowie State University, representing the College of Professional Studies. Now, today's session, of course, as you see the title, is called AI and Digital Literacy in Action, making student learning visible through direct assessment. Now, I want to set the tone up front because this is not going to be an AI hype session. This is more of a learning evidence session because AI is simply an accelerator. So by the end of our time together, we're going to walk away. You're going to walk away with real examples, a few practical models that you can implement and clearly show what students can actually do, not just how they're scored. Now, here's our roadmap, and I'm going to take us through the why, and then from the why, we're going to go straight into a how. And then I provide 3 real life examples of how student work can present evidence, how we can connect them to direct assessment practices using rubrics and digital tools. And I'll be mindful that professionals in the room, you guys aren't looking for cool tech, but you guys are looking for something that's scalable, measurable, defensible, and also aligned. So this is going to be an energetic session, but it's going to also be grounded. Okay, so here's the plain truth in the most plain language, right? Grades tell us what students receive. Direct assessment shows us what students can do. The shift matters because we're in a moment where the world is demanding accountability, workforce readiness, proof, and not just completion. So the question that plagues us is no longer, did they pass? The question is, can they demonstrate the skill? Can they show evidence of competence? And this is where digital literacy and AI become the bridge. Making learning visible means that students create artifacts that you can actually evaluate. These aren't about theoretical outcomes. These are products, these are deliverables and performance-based demonstrations. And what's powerful about these artifacts is just not assessing the learning, but they create a professional identity for our scholars. They leave with evidence that they can take into an interview, internship, fellowship, graduate admissions as they're segueing into graduate school, and also within real world environments. Now, we're under pressure, and I would like to say the same pressure because we're supposed to demonstrate value, show outcomes, meet accreditation requirements, and deliver results. But also, we're in a moment where students are not engaging with AI in ways that are optional. They're already doing it. One of the real questions, though, is are we guiding them into ethical, skill building use, or are we pretending that it's not happening? And I'll be honest, pretending is the most expensive option in the long term. Now, AI is not an outcome, and here's why I draw the line in the sand. Artificial intelligence is a tool that supports thinking, drafting, idea mapping, iterative outcomes, and feedback. But learning is still defined by performance. So when we're talking about AI integration, we're really talking about modernizing how we capture the evidence of learning. Now, to become a little bit more practical, one of the examples that I've pulled together is AI assisted research brief. Here's one of my examples. So this is where your scholars are assigned a research question that are tied to the course outcomes, and AI becomes a part of that workflow structure. So the key is we don't hide the AI step, we actually document it. And this is how students show it. They show it by their original prompt, the AI prompt, the human revision, their citations and evidence, and then the final deliverable is scored by using our rubric. That is a direct assessment because you're evaluating writing, analysis, synthesis, and applied reasoning. Now, here's why this works. The rubric targets learning outcomes, not tool usage. We have to assess what matters: credible sources and citation behavior, depth of learning, the ability to apply ideas in real life situations, ethical decision making, and transparency. So, what that means is even if artificial intelligence, whatever modality you may use, whether it be ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Perplexity, even if artificial intelligence was utilized as a tool to help draft this, students are still accountable for their thinking, their evidence, and their structure. Here's what this looks like in real terms: student deliverables become artifacts, and they don't need to look perfect to be accessible. So when we're pairing them with reflection tied to rubric language, we have direct evidence of skill, we have direct evidence of student thinking, we have direct evidence of clear assessment narrative. Now, this part I encourage you to put in your pocket. And if you do nothing else, consider this 6-step model. So start with the learning outcome, right? And then build assessment that forces demonstration provided in rubric early, requiring AI transparency and collection of artifacts, whether they be digitally, and then also scoring them. And so when looking at your assessment reporting or just reporting overall, the evidence is real. It's not based on assumptions. And so some of those examples, even amongst my faculty assessment coordinators, when it comes to modality of teaching, instead of having students do presentations, PowerPoint presentations, because the other part is that I always reiterate to a lot of the faculty assessment, the faculty assessment coordinators at Bowie State in the College of Professional Studies, that maybe instead of it being a PowerPoint presentation filled with narrative, or maybe instead of it being a research paper filled with narrative, why don't we approach students with vlogs, right? And so while they're able to vlog and within a 1 minute and 30-second video of presenting their knowledge and the outcomes, they're able to actually regurgitate truly what they've learned, and while still being able to be collaborative within AI. And that's part of the assessment process, or us assessing the narrative, contingent on the way that we've positioned the student learning outcomes. So the bigger part in a lot of this is addressing the equity, right? And we cannot talk about, I always say this, we cannot talk about academic freedom without hosting academic responsibility. So in addressing equity, we can't talk about AI and assessment together without talking about the equity within the parameters. So while implementing responsibility, when implementing responsibly, AI reduces barriers by supporting students who struggle with academic writing, who struggle with structure, who struggle with clarity, who struggle with confidence. But the guardrail is that equity is not lowering the standards, it's improving the access to the path that actually meets the standard. So this is where many campuses, as I've done research and partnered with a few counterparts who are also within the assessment space, but leveraging AI as a collaborative tool, integrity is not protected by banning AI. I'll use my chair for social work, for example. And I remember I was walking down the hall and sort of not purposely eavesdropping, but one of her professors had come to her and said, this student because we know within the Turnitin, if most campuses, I believe, use Turnitin with students turning their deliverables or their products. She was saying that one of the professors were telling her that the student completely used AI. It was complete plagiarism. And so one position that I loved really after we had our first faculty assessment coordinator meeting in October is that she had relayed to this professor that we're not going to penalize the student for using AI, but what we do need to establish are the guardrails and how they do it. And so how we do this is that, as I said before, integrity does not is not protected by banning AI. But it's protected by redesigning assignments so students cannot just submit outputs. So it was more of a conversation as Bowie State itself has integrated within its turn-in process the AI that recognizes plagiarism and all generative AI based on language. We know that imp dash a lot of times, because I don't expect our freshman students to know what an emphasis dash truly always is and how to always use it within structure, but we understand that when deliverables are needed, right? When students have to present their work, the deliverable requires documentation, it requires revision, it requires reflection, and it also requires applied reasoning. And students cannot fake competence, they must demonstrate it. So given that scenario, with our chair of social work, what she ended up doing is she now for the coming fall semester, as we're already into the spring, they're strongly considering adapting a more of a deliverable modality and having students verbally demonstrate their knowledge across the board. And another thing that has been also rolled out is using Purdue Institute Purdue universities, as they are the standard for, at least at the university, at the Bowie State University. We obviously use APA 7 as it is the latest the latest model, and how we uh, structure our paper and citations is that she's considering vlogging and having students actually verbally articulate, and so it keeps the students engaged, because we also know that most of our students are the digital natives, right? And so students cannot fake that competence, and they have to demonstrate it. And what better way to demonstrate it verbally from what you understand and within presentation than students just submitting, as I stated previously before, output. So, in closing with direct assessment, this requires future forces to be very visible. So I want to make this very clear that AI is not replacing education, as many have begun to actually question the return on investment of education. AI exposes whether education is actually working. And so when we think within the construct of designing learning artifacts and learning outcomes and evidence, we actually move beyond the guessing work of, is this authentically the student's work, or is the student demonstrating what they can do? When the students demonstrate what they can do, we're not just assessing learning, we're building futures. I want to stop just for a second, just to see if anyone has any questions going forward from any of the slides I've discussed.
I have a question.
Yes, Miss Rosalind, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Could you expand a little bit more on vlogging?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so within vlogging, but instead of it obviously being a blog, right? As we know, that is written. So vlogging is more of having the students, stand before themselves, but or present within classroom or present because we also know that a lot of our students are, like we said, they're digital natives. So they're as we are on the cusp of Gen Alpha going to middle school, a lot of our students are consumer of the TikTok and the Instagram. And so in meeting students within the modality in which they truly understand this also, so in vlogging, it's a motivational piece. It's a motivational piece and tool. Now, further, when the chair and I were discussing vlogging, we also stated, well, there are teleprompts that students could use. So how do you demonstrate? So how do you recognize the difference from a student using a teleprompt to allude or to further define what they've learned and to be able to regurgitate the curriculum? It's more of, she stated that it was more the premise that based on the passion and the way people the way a scholar would present the material, you could tell because then also within the vlogging they'd be talking about more of the curriculum, but then digging more into a reflection piece, and that's what I discussed in the previous. I'll flip back to the previous slide as I was talking about our reflections being a part of it, because we don't want students just regurgitating what they've learned, or also using a teleprompt to kind of show off what they learned, but more of, we want students to also be able to be passionate about the work. And so she said that, I could tell when someone's reading from a screen comparatively to when someone's using their own words to truly allude to what they've learned. And so while even in digging in the vlogging process and having students present their work, we know that they're not just generating outcomes. When they're not just using generative AI to present outcomes or even to present work as if it's their authorship when it truly doesn't belong to them. And so even further, when it comes to vlogging, part of that would still be you have to cite certain things or state that, I did use generative AI to idea map this piece, but within idea mapping this piece, there was also a point of human revision that I used, and all things have to be cited. And that's how we build out digital portfolios that will structurally push them in and that will structurally push them into the real world environments, and they truly be tied to the work.
Thank you.
Yes,
That was
ma'am.
helpful.
Yes, ma'am. And I do want to ask as this is question answer, I do want to ask a few questions, and I don't know if I guess this is just for anyone that's willing to answer. What does AI, I guess, honestly look like on you all's campuses? What does that truly look like, and how is the campus, even at the discipline level and the departmental level, how is that being structured, I guess, across how you guys are how anyone on the call are demonstrating their student learning outcomes and tying that back to something that students can take out can present within the real world here.
Well, I can't tap. I'm trying to tap hands up. I'm so sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
So on our campus, and I teach at LA Trade Tech College, and
Okay.
lots of trades. I teach in the culinary department, and I've in discussing this in department meetings, et cetera, we oftentimes hear instructors say, oh, I could just tell that was AI and I'm not giving them credit. And it got me thinking that I need to redesign the assignments so that they're still learning. They're, the rubric is, attached to the SLOs and the whole bit, but I've incorporated it where they're able to express the knowledge. And so when you mention this, I'm like, oh, I think I'm kind of doing this, but I need to polish it up just a little bit more um, to get that information out of them. I'm only teaching 1 or 2 online classes this term
Hmm.
that are asynchronous,
Yes, ma'am.
um, but most of my classes are in person. And I have had so many students, the fear of discussing a particular topic, in front of a course. I've gone so far as to, okay, maybe let's do it as a group assignment. But I've learned that exactly what you're discussing is one way to get them out of, just copying material that doesn't belong to them and, presenting it, because it's just so evident that I know when they don't know the information. I know when they're just regurgitating exactly, what they copy and pasted. So I just continue to, like all of my assignments for all of my classes, I just change them up so that it's having them be more accountable to thinking, as you mentioned earlier.
Okay, so Miss Doctor, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure, but Doctor Roslyn, one question. So I did hear you say that one of I guess one of the disciplines within your college is culinary, and that's one of
I
the
teach in that culinary department.
Okay, so
Yes.
while I don't know what that looks like, is I guess within culinary, so is vlogging more of a piece that you're considering using, because I don't mind connecting also on the latter part to kind of allude and give more of this a deeper depth of display of how vlogging could actually work within partnership of AI here. So I don't.
Oh, well, I would love some assistance because I'm retiring soon in June, but still, I have a great passion for, what I do, and I want the students to walk away with having more knowledge before they stepped into the course. And any way that I could, connect them to, knowing how to better use AI, and also um, the accountability to thinking,
Roger that.
would just be a game changer.
Yes, ma'am. Because the other part is we also have to like even within application. So also as the assessment coordinator, one of the other pieces for the under the direction of my dean, I was responsible for rolling out the Gen X or an internship pipeline that I called Gen X, which is next gen generation, right? And so in rolling out that pipeline, we also and connecting students with internships and fellowships and opportunities right outside as they're getting ready to segue, either whether it be graduate school or segue truly directly within their careers. um, Digital portfolios, and that's why I landed right back here on this slide. Digital portfolios are one of the bigger things where a lot of times right now within this age to be requested. So I don't know what a 400 course level for culinary arts, and so I'm going to tell you what I'm imagining. I'm imagining someone maybe having to cook or display or show something. So in vlogging that they're able to be, and a lot of times a lot of people reach for perfection. It has to look this way, it has to look that way. And even within a strategic market, from a strategic marketing perspective, content does not have to look perfect, but we have to see that there has to be evidence of clear assessment narrative, while there's direct evidence of student thinking, student comprehension, and student skills. And so again, just to reiterate, I do not. It's so important, and I think vlogging is one of the bigger tools to be used, because how many times we don't have to ask our students to whip out their phones to do video for a concert, or if they're eating at a really nice restaurant and they want to show that, and they want to cut, that's where their creativity. And so and one of the pieces, one of my recommendations for vlogging is because you truly get to understand the breadth of the way the student thinks, and even if some of their narrative seems to go off course, you can redirect the understanding while still being able to utilize whatever they do within their whether the cooking scenario that I stated would be used more towards a capstone or something like that within your course. And like I said, I really don't know how you all are set up, and maybe we can have an off conversation on how that really looks. But vlogging also allows them to display their work later on as they're stepping into the job markets. And so I think that's one of the bigger pieces when you're able to stand before and articulate the knowledge and narrative in which you understand. So, and so I open the opening it back up to any other questions or comments that anyone may have for me.
I have my hand raised. So
Okay, I'm
my
sorry.
name is, yeah, you're fine. There's a lot of people in this room. My name is Stephanie Marshall. I'm the Director of Educational Effectiveness at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California.
Mhm.
So AI is obviously, we're deeply concerned here. On a personal level, as a researcher, I'm very concerned. As the person that leads our faculty assessment group, I'm deeply concerned. A lot of the ideas and the things that you're presenting here to us today make a lot of sense, and we've already adopted them in many of our courses and our activities. Certainly, assessment is something that we're talking about, and I run a survey, not a survey, with this group once a year. So I'm trying to develop questions to ask them about how this is affecting and impacting the work. So in art and design specifically, and this varies by institution, especially ACAD versus state versus UC, et cetera. So how we develop and build towards points of assessment in our curriculum, oftentimes you'll see students developing portfolios or bodies of work that are then assessed. And there's a big difference between art fields and disciplines and design disciplines and fields. So I have a lot of issues because faculty will often, and you can always go look at our Art Center website. We have a policy statement on AI and encourage faculty to add a statement to their syllabus specifically about the use of AI, whether there's no AI or at a particular level. And
Mhm.
that may vary before the points of assessment that I deal with. So you may have faculty, even in our humanities, our GE type courses, that do not allow folks to use AI, do not allow students to use AI. And that can become a problem because in fact, if they have faculty that are allowing them to use AI and then faculty not allowing them to use AI, by the time they get to those points of assessment where they're doing portfolio review or exhibition review, the faculty that are actually executing the assessment don't want the students to have used AI, but now they've been allowed to. So that there's a big disconnect there. One of the things that I'm very curious about, if anyone on this call or anyone, Alan, that you've been interacting with, is how are you doing indirect assessment of AI? Meaning, like, are you perhaps issuing student surveys, asking them about their attitudes and beliefs around AI? We've thought to perhaps add a question to our graduate employment survey that we issue to when you're out classes, cohorts, asking them if AI is something that they use regularly in their day-to-day jobs. So I'm curious if anybody, or if you, Alan, have been thinking through with your team how you're going to indirectly ask students about their use of AI.
So I will tell you. So we're right now under the provost. They're still drumming up our AI task force and recognizing some of the pain points and the things that you've stated. One thing that I've done within, because this is a question that's often brought up between, because I'm, like I said, I'm the assessment coordinator for the College of Professional Studies, but then there are three other assessment coordinators that walk across the college, and then we work under the direction of our assistant vice president of OPAA, Dr. Becky Brzezinski. And so we haven't delineated across the university. It hasn't been totally delineated as more of like we're while our practices may seem as if we're reactive right now, we're becoming a lot more proactive in our approach. So one thing that I can say that so I can't speak for the overall assessment piece, because I think that's still a piece that Dr. Brzezinski and our team are still overall figuring out for what that looks like for the university. Um, what we one thing that I can say that we have done, as you discussed, as you brought a main point for syllabus, we just recently had our it wasn't faculty institute, but a similarity as our provost comes out and talks to the colleges, and we were talking about implementing language within our within the within the syllabi of AI. What I've done is create so I used to do instructional design. I created an instructional design video about 1 minute and 30 seconds, and so exposing what AI is and why we're not going to penalize it, but we want students to be collaborative in regards to using it, while at the same time understanding that when you utilize AI, let me go back to that previous slide here. Hold on a second. In utilizing AI, we want there's a creating a document. So still waiting on my dean to honestly to truly approve, because it has to be something that's approved by the provost. But teaching students, like, you can say AI, right? So in that road mapping, this is the original prompt. This is the original prompt that you were given based on the assignment. This is the original human version input. This is what your generative AI presented to you, right? And then also where the human revision is. And so to answer that question, we are, just as you've articulated, we're still figuring out that process. And so while we're doing it, at least within the college levels, we are still working we're still working at the university level and how to implement this overall, right? And then we also recognize that we can't throw just a blanket over it. And so even what I've encouraged when I've sat down with my dean, I was like, students, when they open the syllabus, right, and we usually have our modalities, or the modality we use, or the LMS system that we use is Blackboard Ultra, implementing that video right there as students log on. And we know that the syllabi, or the syllabus, is a student contract, right? It's a contract between them and the professor. And so I've also created a terms and agreements where it says, I did review this video. I also understand what this video is, because it's encouraging. Whenever you use AI, you have to cite it because it's not your original idea. And right behind it, there has to be human revision, right? And so we don't want people to be apprehensive or scared to use it, because I've literally just seen last semester, a handful of students failed because they used generative AI when it was totally discouraged and they were told not to. And so it's like, while I understand the apprehension of professors not wanting students to use AI, it's already here. So I don't think should be something that discouraged, but we should implement the ethics and the decision making, the transparency in which students do so. To answer your question, we are still figuring out our processes, but at least at the college level in which I serve, I began to kind of construct these things. And as a team, as the assessment team, we are figuring out how to implement this overall across the university, because we also understand, as you said before, with as you work in your work is within arts, that looks very different from someone who's within natural sciences, right? Or who would be or within biology, and what that truly looks like, right? And we don't want our doctors, using generative AI once we get on the table, right? We want them to be knowledgeable, to understand and be able to regurgitate the information and be totally competent. And so to answer that question, we're still figuring out our processes at the university level, but while at the same time understanding that the products are deliverable. It's not about just the theoretical outcomes, but it has to be performance-based demonstrations. And I don't know if I hope that that helps.
Yes, out of curiosity, so I'm just for the video that you've mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
do you have like a prompt at the end or something that appears where they can take a survey? Because that's really
I have not.
important.
So that's a good. That I did not think of that. I did not think of. I can honestly tell you, I did not think of. I have not thought to implement that. It was more of the video was just embedded in the syllabi, and after they see the syllabi, there's a question. There's a check mark. There's a checkbox at the end that allows them to acknowledge they cannot. And this is per course, right? This is not just overall for a discipline. This is just for per course. So I am teaching. Let's say that I'm teaching criminal justice, professional ethics. That video is implemented within my syllabus. After that student reviews the video, it prompts them to the next question, and it's a signed document. And so it allows them to check the box, sign it, and that the checkbox creates a signature between the student and the professor or the lecturer that's delivering the course. And then from there, moving on, they understand that anything that you guys generate without citing, right, that is called plagiarism. And but I have not thought that far in regards to an indirect way of
Yeah, I
how
would
we
say
implement survey.
potentially using like a third-party system. So Canvas, of course, as we know, has quizzes and surveys that you can
Right.
issue, but
Hmm.
that data is very, very difficult to collect. Canvas and other LMSs are not quite as intuitive. So if you
Yes, ma'am.
use a third-party system, for example, we use Alchemer, and you embed a survey that can easily be, we can consolidate various programs or various courses or subjects that are issuing and having students respond to those surveys. So I may steal that from you. Thank you for the suggestion. Sorry, I'll stop now. Okay.
No, well, Miss Marshall, I don't like as long as my dean, I can go back to my dean and Dr. Brzezinski, and as long as I'm allowed to share the video, I think I'm gonna borrow some of your knowledge too, and see if we can use some of using Alchemer and looking into those other party modalities and the ways to engage and survey our students, because I think that we still have to continually be able to be, like I said, proactive and be able to pivot to really capture this data that's kind of hard a lot of times to capture. So if I can, if upon permission from my dean, I will ask the question. If I can release the video to you, I will do not mind sharing, Ms. Marshall. Did anyone have any other questions or any other comments? Well, thank you so much for participating. I'm gonna flip back to my contact. So, if anyone's interested in contacting or wants access to the slides, definitely send me an email. I can be reached at cbeck2@bowiestate.edu, and I will share the slides with you all. And I don't mind being a resource for any and everyone on the call. Thank you so much for definitely participating in the session, and enjoy the symposium.